How nice! Alright, so I looked at the mod and it seems to have pretty standard stuff for organizing a party, like building blocks and decoration blocks, which is, I'm assuming, for the ballroom, masks, food, lethal weapons. I understand why this disc could be used for playing catch, it looks pretty fun, but there's a longsword here. Why do you need a longsword for a party?
Your slice might not include the shadow and track together. The same thing happens when track appears without its shadow. You know, I just read that and it didn't mean anything. You know, I read it all and I didn't understand any of it. One of the things that makes this game tough is sometimes you line up the shot that looks pretty good, but after you hit the ball, your perspective shifts and you hit a wall. The most annoying hole on this course was the second to last one. Not only was the hole itself confusing, but I wasn't performing very well either. Bro, I just suck at the golf part of the game. Yeah, I suck at both parts of the game. I can't comprehend the 4D space. And I can't play golf, man. I stink. 12 over par. Oh my god. My worst performance so far. Oh my gosh, bro. Triple bogey. Whatever, bro. Whatever.
What we need.
Here's my next Steam achievement. Completed the Dunes course. I moved on to the third of 7 courses, and this one is snow themed. Again, I was just trying to get through the courses, but I actually started off pretty well. Yes. What a good first hole, dude. What a good first hole. Eagle off the bat? Are you crazy? Damn. Sorry, birdie. Birdie off the bat. The second hole introduced ice terrain, which is a bad time. It completely changes the momentum of the ball. Oh, there's ice? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. This hole had some tricky business too. Yes, this is exactly where I want it to be. I think the hole is here somewhere. In a different dimension. Look, the hole, it's right here. Oh, what? What? I thought I was right next to the hole. It still doesn't make sense, bro. I've been playing for over an hour. I don't know what the f is happening. It took an embarrassing amount of strokes to get this hole done. I did figure out while doing this course the importance of volume view. But with elevation, this isn't the full solution. It was clicking though, and it felt pretty damn good. Oh, it's starting to make more sense now. This 3D view helps a lot, I think. This 3D view. Because if I, if I change it like this, right? I'm looking over here, you can't see the hole because I'm not looking at the right plane. But if I just look at the hole like this, dude, it's starting to make so much more sense. Saying all this doesn't mean I didn't struggle, because I definitely did. Dude, why is it bouncing out of bounds? Some of these holes took me a lot of shots. Let's go, 10 over. I was definitely making some of these holes look a lot harder than they actually are. It's impossible, bro. It's impossible. Who designed this? How did they figure this shit out? How the f did anyone... Oh, never mind, I'm a genius. Just like the rest of the courses I've done so far, this one took me about 30 minutes to complete. Oh man, I thought that was in. Okay, here we go. Boom, 4 over par. That's the Arctic done. Complete Arctic course. Yippee! After almost having a stroke trying to read what my interdimensional friend was saying, the multi-dimensional exchange oh my gosh. I can't read it. I started the 4th course called Mezzanine. Elevator pitch. No, this looks so confusing. Mezzanine is the trippiest course so far and has some confusing and difficult holes. Too hard, no! Oh, that sounds terrible. The second to last hole gave me more grief than any hole in the game so far. Here's a sad montage of my experience. Yeah! God damn. Go over! No! Oh.
And it actually worked, but it kind of looks like garbage. This is the story of how turning 4 sheets of plywood into a $1,200 chair ended up being one of the most satisfying redemption stories of my life.
Oh, baby!
So about 1 year ago, actually, I think it was exactly 1 year ago, I 3D printed this $1,200 designer chair, the Magus Spun chair. I split it into like 63 pieces so it could be printed on desktop 3D printers, and it actually worked, but it kind of looks like garbage.
Oh my God, this cracking, dude, is insane. I wouldn't be surprised if this whole thing broke while I'm filming this scene. I can literally feel it coming apart as I roll. Oh my gosh. Jeez, dude.
For a year, this thing has been staring at me from the corner of my workshop like a broken toy begging to be put out of its misery. And even as I 3D printed better and better chairs, I just couldn't stop thinking about the Magus Spun chair. This is one of my favorite pieces of furniture, and the one time I tried to make one, I completely failed. I thought about getting access to one of those giant 3D printers and trying to print it in one piece like my original idea, but then I got a better idea. This idea came to me after I remembered this video where Thomas Heatherwick talks about how he designed the Magus Spun chair, and in the video he shows some of his plywood prototypes. But what if the entire chair was made of plywood? Not just a skeletal prototype, but a solid, smooth wooden chair that feels just as luxurious as one you would buy in a store. Heck, maybe I can make it feel more luxurious. Could I make it for less than $1,200?
Oh my God, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the?
Well, considering the price of plywood at Home Depot, I was off to a pretty rough start, but luckily, this was gonna be pretty much all the material I needed. Of course, the cost of materials is only part of a product's cost, so I'll also be keeping track of all the time I spent on this project, but that's all assuming I can actually transform overpriced construction lumber into a beautiful, smooth, $1,200 designer chair that can roll just as nicely as the real one. The first step of this project was to cut each sheet of plywood into a 4-foot square. This is where having a track saw comes in clutch. Navigating a full sheet of plywood through my folding table saw would be a nightmare, but the track saw makes this very safe and easy. Yes, I bought the expensive green brand, but there are much more affordable options. I cut the plywood into squares so I could make 37 discs on my CNC. You actually don't need a CNC to do this. I'm making the chair entirely from simple discs, so you could build this chair with a circle cutting jig, bandsaw, or a jigsaw if you were really careful. Now, because I already printed the Magus Spun chair, I already had a 3D model, and I am definitely not sharing this model online because I don't want to get sued by Magus, but it was pretty easy to model this with publicly available information, especially after visiting a fancy furniture store to verify my measurements. So I had pretty much a perfect model of the Magus Spun chair, and theoretically, all I had to do was slice it over and over by the thickness of the plywood, but I quickly realized that if I made this thing completely solid, it was going to be incredibly heavy and use way more than 5 sheets of plywood. So I hollowed out the base, and while I was at it, I added hidden holes to every layer so I could line everything up with 1/4-inch dowels. Most of the work was arranging the discs on my stock to minimize waste, and I am certain there are programs that do this for you, but I kind of like the challenge. It's really satisfying, and in the end, I got it down to 9 squares. So this would use 4.5 sheets of plywood, assuming I don't make any mistakes.
Well, that's not good. Oh, CNC's cheating. CNC's not real woodworking. All you have to do is push the button and the robot does all the work. Did the bit break? Oh, it didn't break. Haha!
Honestly, it would be incredible if the CNC was as easy as pushing a button and getting a perfect result, but these machines, like anything else, they're a skill, and there are so many variables. Every time I use mine, something unexpected goes wrong. In this case, it's because I'm actually 3D carving some of the pieces, which is a new skill for me, so I'm still learning how to set up the toolpaths correctly, which is extra hard because I'm doing it directly in Fusion, which is powerful but extremely unintuitive. Anyways, I went a little too deep on that first attempt, which grabbed the bit and pulled it out of the collet, but those mistakes just make it all the more satisfying when it finally works. So I'm only 3D carving some of the pieces, but technically I could have 3D carved every piece, which would have vastly cut down on the work I'm gonna have to do later. But I was so excited to try this power carving technique and transform these jagged edges into a smooth surface. It just seemed like it was gonna be incredibly satisfying. So I only 3D carved the inside portion of the chair, the part that forms the seat, and we'll see if I regret that later on. Anyways, back in the blissfully ignorant present, the CNC work was done and I was ready to start stacking the layers together. Now, wood glue was going to provide all the strength I needed, but wood glue only works if it's clamped together while drying. So on those first few layers, I just used wood screws as clamps, making sure to set them in far enough that they wouldn't poke out the carved surface. But pretty soon, the layers got so thin that there was no space for screws. So I switched to the old super glue clamp method. That's where you alternate dots of wood glue and super glue, spray the dry side with the activator, and the super glue will cure instantly, holding the layers together while the wood glue cures. And that works pretty well, but sometimes it fails and the layers pop apart. So eventually, I just switched to good old-fashioned clamps. Now, before I could attach the rest of the layers, I had to deal with this hollow base. The problem is that the top of the chair is basically a funnel, which would guide quarters, keys, or anything else in your pockets into that hollow section, where it would rattle around until you shook the chair like a cartoon bully. So I 3D printed this tube out of wood PLA to create a tunnel. There's a good chance this will flex as the chair rolls, so I printed it sideways to maximize strength and glued the pieces together with 3D glue. This basically welds PLA, so the joint should be as strong as the material itself. I designed the tunnel to go inside of that center hole, and it was a bit of a tight fit, but luckily I had a flap wheel that fit perfectly inside of the hole. So after literally 2 minutes of sanding, we had ourselves a perfect fit. Now this works on the bottom, but for some reason, I thought it would be a good idea to have the tube butt up against the top, which made for an extremely tricky glue up. I started by surrounding the bottom with construction adhesive, then applied wood glue to the plywood ring, construction adhesive to the top of the tube, and super glue around it all. Then when I slid on the piece of plywood, I could carefully pull the tube up to the plywood, and the super glue would hold them together while the other glues dried. Let's not focus too much on my weird design because, ooh, look, this seat is starting to take shape, and it was so satisfying to see my 3D carvings come together into a single smooth shape. Well, smooth-ish? I mean, it will be smooth after a little bit of sanding.